rifle guns. One of my favorite, most unaffordable thing you could possibly ever want. Basically, they look like shotguns, but instead of shooting 12 gauge, 16 gauge, stuff like that, they shoot real ridiculously highly powered cartridges, such as, like, say, the 4 bore. You could also get a 2 bore, which is usually a black powder, and there's also the 8 bore and stuff like that. Now, these things are basically dangerous game, extremely large animals. I think this rifle's called the Mastodon. That pretty much says it all. Uh, Nitro Express rifles. There's so many Wildcat cartridges here, but the big staples is basically these are African, the big five, the most dangerous animals: elephants, water buffalo, lion, and I forget what the other two is hippo, and I think it's giraffe, but might be anyway. But the big animals, and big animals are, it's kind of strange. Yeah, how you kill a big animal is typically not so much through shock power, but through penetration, where you've shot them in an artery and they bleed out. But the problem with some of these big animals, really big animals, is they get really angry when you shoot them, and they tend to want to stample people because they live long. Although they die and they bleed out, they tend to live long enough to usually make for the person. So back in the early 1800s, people started really kind of beefing up the rifles. At one point, the 303 British was considered an elephant gun. It was, at its time, built back in the late 1800s, it was considered powerful enough that you could drop an elephant with it with a well-placed shot. Okay, and but the problem is if you didn't get a well-placed shot, you ticked off the elephant. Usually had like 10 guys just pretty much turn the elephant into Swiss cheese, and even at that, the thing would still charge and stample a few people. So they had to come up with heavier rifles than that. So black powder still being around, most of the cartridges, like the 2 bore, the 4 bore, and stuff like that, a lot of them were still black powder. A lot of them still today are black powder because it's just you can't get the fine pressures. The black powder it's just no replacement for displacement. You have a big lead ball flying out at you know it's like basically trying to shoot a brick through something, and that's basically the effect you got. So you had penetration because you had such a big, heavy bullet with lots of energy, but it also, because it was such a big, heavy bullet, it also had lots of expansion and energy transfer, which would give you both worlds, that hydrostatic shock, which is also known as knockdown power. Hydrostatic shock to deliver as much shock energy into the animal to knock it down or knock it out, and then definitely enough to penetrate from one end of the animal to the other, or heart and lungs type deal. So with that said, that was kind of where it was, but that still wasn't enough. They wanted to use modern gunpowders and stuff like that. So then you start seeing like this Nitro Express stuff show up, which these are all old cartridges to begin with, and I don't have the history on all of them, but in general, I don't know what came out first, but you would have really high calibered like Nitro Express, 470, the 400, the 450, which are kind of the same. Then you had other things like the 500 Nitro Express, the 577 Tyrannosaur, which is a very powerful. The Tyrannosaur is the rifle, but the 577, and then the 505 Gibbs, and the 405 Jeffrey, I think, is another cartridge. And then, of course, you have the H&H 375, the 9x3 by 140? No, 9x3 by, I forget how long, but anyway, the European stuff. And then, of course, you have, coming down the ladder, you started getting into things like 4570. So those are the old cartridges. Now you can get stuff like H&H 375, which is kind of most African safari guns that they say that's kind of like the best all around, where you could still shoot small game with it and not obliterate it into itty bitty pieces, but yet you can still drop an elephant. Now anybody that shoots a 7mm Remington Magnum, they basically, the H&H 375, the 7mm, is a scaled down, neck down casing to the 7mm. So you get all that power in a bullet that's basically like a 30-06, and the 7mm is an awesome rifle to shoot. A little more kick than a 30-06, but like about 1,000 feet per second faster and about 1,000 foot-pounds more energy. Awesome round. So H&H 375 a little more modern. And then you get the stuff like the 4.58, a lot the 4.58 Winchester, which are really close. And the double rifles, they're not cheap. They are definitely not cheap. The cheapest one you can get on the market today is the Baikal. It's a Russian-made one, 45.70. Now, 45.70 is no slouch. That's still that's a kill round. That's what I call a kill round. To me, a 30-06 is a penetrating round, which does a lot of damage. But a 45.70, it's like a big slug. It's a slug gun, right? And it does a lot of damage, but it doesn't penetrate like the 30-06. But it has so much energy transfer, making it a good deer round, right? But that said, a 45.70 is no slouch. But you also get like some wildcats, like the Quigley Down Under rifle, the 45.90. There's a 45.120, 45.140, and then now you have a 50.140 as well, which is a 50 cal. So there's all kinds of rounds that you can shoot out of these things. Typically, you're looking at from about $5,000 and up, and all the stuff in the $5,000 ranges like 30-06. 45.70, H&H 375, and 9x3 by, I forget what the length is, cartridge. And it's a really long cartridge, the 9x3. The Europeans, they still shoot them. I think it's, I can't remember the length of it. I'm sure somebody will add it down below, but it's very popular. And of course, there's a whole host of other ones that I'm forgetting. Now, most of this ammunition is custom-made ammunition, like the rifles. So it's kind of one of those things where when you buy the rifle, you're going to see the price tags really high on these double guns, because what typically happens is because you have basically two barrels and one sight. So what happens is one barrel is dialed in, okay, and then the other barrel has to be adjusted to hit approximately in the same spot as the first barrel. So what they do is they solder one barrel to the next, they shoot it, see where it hits, they unsolder it and solder it again. So this is where the cost is. Now the cheaper rifles, what they do is they have like a jack screw in between each barrels, and although it kind of adds a little bit of ugliness to the way it works, it is simple and it's quite, allows you to adjust it fairly close, and it keeps the price down. But then you have kind of like, it's not as pretty, because you have this like big bracket on the end of the barrel type of thing. But it does work. These things can go from an average 45.70 might be about $5,000, but that's an average price, and even used are about that average price. But if you start getting into, say, like the Nitro Express stuff, like the 470, 450 Nitro Express 500, or the 600 Overkill, that type of thing, or the 700. Is it 700 Nitro Express? I think it's, yeah, and I think then there's that 930 JDJ, which is just a ridiculous, the rifle itself weighs like 100 pounds or something like that, just to take the recoil. Now, most of these rifles are heavy, but once you start getting into like the Nitro Express stuff, you're looking at about a 20,000, 15,000 up to like a rifle like this is probably $50,000-$60,000. Because they're kind of, they're artworks as well. Now, I'd love to have a 45.70, the Baikal, but I mean, me, it's kind of a go big or go home kind of thing. Like, I have no inclination to hunt elephants. Like, I mean, what am I going to do with an elephant, right? But to blow stuff up with these double guns, I think would just be priceless. Like how many barrel jumps can you disintegrate? And just what happens when you pull both barrels? Well, I can tell you what happens when you pull the trigger on a 460 Weatherby, which is ridiculously powerful. It has something like 8,000, 9,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. Okay. Now, I was a teenager when I did this. I started out in the regular shooting position. I had a good bead down range. I pulled the trigger. Next thing you know, 1 foot was off the ground. My shoulder hurt really bad, and I was the barrel was about 70 degrees in the air, and it was about 2 feet back from where I was originally standing. And I felt like I got into a small car accident. It was awesome. Oh yeah, it was awesome. I was like, is it really like that? Is it really that powerful? Who hit me? I didn't bruise. My shoulder was red, but I did bruise. I mean, I think I was wearing a jacket. That's probably why. But holy snot balls, that was a kick. And I wasn't a fat kid, but I was well fed at that age. But even at that, I don't think I was more than 145 pounds. Like, I was like, I never want to do that again, but I got to know what happens the second time. That's the kind of guy I am. It's like, I know it's bad. I know it's going to be really bad, and I know you shouldn't do it. There, Nitro Express 700. I would like to pull both, like in a double gun, both barrels, just to see what happens. Because the Nitro Express 700 has something like 200 plus foot-pounds of felt recoil. Wow. Rigby 416, there's a cartridge that you can actually kind of afford. And you can get bolt guns in these, chambered in these, if you're just after the cartridge. Like for example, for about $800 you can get a 458 lot. Uh, it's definitely not a double gun, but if you're just after the cartridge, however, understand that you're going to spend about $100 for around. Most of the ammunition is custom. Now, because of the massive recoil, many of these rifles, they're not only works of art, they're actually engineering challenges too, because they have to have mercury in the buttstock so that it absorbs the recoil. If not, it would pretty much kill everybody that try to shoot it. Now there are, for example, if you want to keep it on the black powder and just big bore, you can get a 72 cal Kodiak Express for about $1,300 or $1,400 Canadian. I've seen them at Marstar, and they're pretty, but they're black powder. I want a break barrel. I love hammer guns, don't get me wrong, but in the double guns, for some reason, if it's a shotgun, it has to be a hammer gun for me. But if it's a double gun, it has to be hammerless for me. Don't ask me why I'm like that. I'm just like that. That's they look like toys. I got to know. I think that's the 4-bore or something like that. Just ridiculous. But again, these are kind of the types of things when you look at them, it's like, wow. I've never seen a double gun up close, but it definitely captures the attention. And many of these things too, like the bullets are custom made, the ammunition's custom made. And they're loaded specific to probably each barrel because each barrel is going to hit somewhere different, right? So you can't really use factory ammunition. So these things are very, very expensive, But again, like anything, there's always somebody out there that's going to. I'm just waiting for somebody to build, the 470 Nitro Express or something, or the 505 Gibbs, or even the 458, in a double gun for like $500. It's going to be, it's not going to be pretty, but it should work, and it's probably not going to work well, but it should work enough. If you can hit something at, you have to understand, like the $50,000 guns, those things, they could probably, with the iron sights, hit out to probably about 200-300 yards, but most of them, because of the way the bullets are designed, they're designed for like a mass hit all at once. They're not really designed like a 500 or 1,000 yard rifle. These are, quick shoulder, quick balanced rifles. They're heavier at the end than they are, they're balanced. British rifles tend to be balanced towards the rear, towards the buttstock. American rifles tend to be balanced barrel heavy. But when we're talking quick shouldering for hunting with these dangerous game, you need something that's going to come up to your shoulder really quick. But again, some of these rifles are like, anywhere from 12 pounds up to 20, on average, I think the Bacala is something like 8 pounds shooting a 45-70. So you're going to feel that, but 45-70, I haven't shot a 45-70, but I've shot, like I say, the 7mm, and, I've shot, several 12 gauge type slugs. For somebody who wants a cheap double gun, buy yourself a side-by-side 12 gauge, and you can buy inserts for 45-70. And possibly 30-06 as well. If and they're just basically metal barrels that you insert right into your 12 gauge shotgun. And I was thinking of doing that, but I want something big bore, like ridiculous big bore. But you have to understand, there's a limit to even like the breech of a 12 gauge. You're not going to be able to put like a Nitro Express in there, even with the barrel sleeves in there, because the breech won't take that kind of a pressure. And these things if they blow up in your face, you're going to lose your head. Like these things are ridiculously, insanely high pressured. You've got bullets that weigh up to 1,000 grains, some 1,200 grains. An ounce, okay, is 455 grains. Okay, or is it 700 grains? I can't remember. Anyway, it's either 455 grains or 700 grains is an ounce. Yeah, Yeah, because 1 pound is 7,000 ounces, 16 ounces to the pound. Okay. No, no, sorry. I'm all screwed up now. Yeah, no, 7,000 grains is 1 pound. 16 ounces is a pound. Okay, so 7,000 grains is 1 pound, or 16 ounces is a pound, and 455. A grain weighs is 455. Okay, an ounce is 455 grains. 1 pound is 7,000 ounces, and there's 16 ounces to the pound. There. Yeah. I mentioned McKeated. I figured out. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, very, very expensive. Very, very cool. In the James Bond move, I think it's a 505 Gibbs that he has. The double gun he has shoots the 505 Gibbs. Again, there's just so many different types of double guns out there. They're really beautiful, really cool. I'd love to have one day. Like anything, if you had $1,000,000 times 10 to the power of 1,000, maybe you could buy all the toys you'd like. But I just like to, just shoot a couple of them, and like anything. Like the Barrett 50 cal, for example, I'm less interested in that than I am in big bore hunting rounds, because the big bore hunting rounds, it's not that they go far, it's just that they break everything. Like I said, the things I would blow up with a double gun, I'd be like, like see how many toasters you could shoot through, or toilet bowls, or jugs of water. I would have a lot of fun with it. And okay, well maybe I mean, I know a guy who actually hunts a moose with a 4.58 Winchester. I mean, that's a pretty hefty round too. I have a Winchester bullet. I've actually, what do I got? I got the 460. Rigby, which 416, sorry, Rigby. I have the 458 Winchester, which I also have the H&H 375. So I have a few African rifle rounds, because I collect ammo as well as rifles. But I've always kind of looked at the H&H 375 and visualized that more in the bolt gun, which I thought, well, the H&H 375 is way overkill for deer, but it might be pretty good for moose, But again, at $4 a shot, I mean, is it worth it? Is it not? Like 45-70 is still about $60 a box. A 20, the H&H 375 is a little bit more than that. The 458 is like $80-$100 a box. A 20. So after the 4.58s, it's like everything goes up. Nitro Express stuff is like $200 for 15 or something like that, I'm sure. Some of this ammunition is up to $80 a round. Yeah, that expensive. Wow. Now in the black powder, on the other hand, if you're just after the big bore, like the 72 cal or the 69 caliber or 68 caliber, 58 caliber, 50 caliber, 50 caliber stuff in double guns like the Kodiak Express stuff. 50 caliber muzzleloader rounds are, they're cheap and they're big bore. Now, technically, I have my big bore rifle is my Great Plains Hunter, which is a black powder 50 caliber, 32-inch barreled. It's a beautiful gun. And yes, I know people have been saying, when are you going to take that thing out and shoot it? It's coming. I mean, I've been really busy the past couple of weeks, and I'm going to probably be busy till about the middle of June, and then things are probably going to slow down a bit for me. And on the slow days, I'm going to blow stuff up. Blow it up good. But anyway, redneck, eh? Actually, I do have redneck because I have really bad sunburn right now. But anyway, just around the neck. But anyway, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So like my big bore gun is my 50 caliber muzzleloader. And I remember I told my friend I haven't shot anything with my muzzleloader yet. And I told him, I said, because he wasn't going to get into black powder, and he said, nah, I'm not interested. And then I started, kind of egging him on a bit, wow, it's really cool. I said, these are big bullets. I said, it's not like a 30-06 that's going to go, or, the 270 or something like that. You can shoot, 400 or 500 yards with it. But I said, I said 100 yards and in, I said black powders. Like, it's like throwing a brick at something. And he shot a deer. Actually, he shot a deer right in the butthole. He thought the deer was facing him. But the deer was actually just kind of looking over his shoulder. And he shot it. He said the deer he says it just dropped on all fours. And he's like, him and his dad looked for 10 minutes to try to see where he hit it. He says he couldn't see any blood, he couldn't see anything. And then when they started skinning it, he says I hit it an inch from the butthole. And of course, but he said it penetrated right through to the front of the chest. So, and that was with I think 150 grains of black powder with a 300 grain. Or no, he was using a 250 grain 50 caliber bullet. So if that's what a black powder can do, Black powder bullets. I have 405 grain bullets is the biggest I got, but I think the biggest I can get is a 540 grain for the 50 cal. That's a big bullet. Now, what I would like to have, okay, because depending on the barrel length, for example, the max I can put in my barrel is 100 grains because I'll get overcharged, but I can get up to 2,200 feet a second on a 405 grain bullet. So we're talking like some pretty good hit power there. Now, what people don't get about big, heavy bullets, okay, they don't fly as fast, okay, and sometimes the numbers are not as impressive. For example, H&H 375, okay, over 3,000 foot-pounds. I can't remember the exact number, but over 3,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy on that almost 40 caliber bullet, right? Now, so usually the bullets are kind of rounded at the end, so they're basically like a soft point, right? So all that mass, okay, the PSI is basically calculated on the edge of that bullet of all that mass. For example, on my 405 grain bullet, I'm only getting like 1,100 foot-pounds, something like that. About half of that, or not quite half of that, of a 30-06, okay? But however, it's on a bullet that's 2/3 larger. So the diameter, if you were to take that 405 grain bullet and lengthen it out so that it was no thicker than a 30-06, a 308 caliber bullet, and brought it to a nice hard point boat tail kind of thing, well, that thing would be probably 5,000 psi on the end of it, because I got something the size of my thumb, basically all that displacement is on the end of that bullet, so that's why the number tends to come lower. PSI, the muzzle energy tends to be lower on those types of bullets on the muzzle, for the black powders. Now, that said, when you think about that, think about these big bore Nitro Express 700, that type of thing. Those bullets, okay, are really big, okay, and they have huge numbers of, some 19,000 foot-pounds. There's one, I forget, it's the 830 something, and it has something like 21,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy on a big bullet and a lot of surface. So if you were to take that and put it into a point, it's probably like 60 or 80,000 psi onto that point. If you were to take it to like a normal 308 type of bullet point. So that's why these things are just so massively powerful, which makes them that much more awesome, right? Meaning I want one. But anyway, I guess I'll leave it at that. I know I talked a lot about black powder, rather than just the double guns, but it's kind of the principle is kind of the same, right? It's a big bore death is what it is, and I don't know. I'd love to go on an African safari one day. There's a guy here, WT Outfitters. He basically went to Africa, I guess 3 years ago. First or second day there, he's sitting out on the porch, and one of those kudus, basically like a kind of gigantic antelope. And anyway, he shot one of the largest ones there, just sitting off the porch. It was just by luck this thing stepped out and he shot this thing. And the picture of it is just nuts. Like the horns are, they got like the spiraling horns. And the horns have got to be 5-6 feet just themselves. Anyway, it was one of the largest ones ever taken in that area, and he just kind of shot it basically sitting in his underwear type of deal early in the morning, I guess. So that's pretty awesome. See, I'd like to go after something like that, but I'd love to go on an African safari someday if I had the millions of dollars to do so, which doesn't cost millions of dollars, but I would love to do that. But for me, I can't just shoot something and not eat it, you know what I mean? Okay, and obviously you can't bring everything back from Africa with you, so I'd have to make sure that, and most hunters do this, is they make sure that the people get the meat, right? But I would want the hides. I'd want everything mounted and stuff like that. Go and you shoot whatever, and there you go. Do the conservation or whatever. Rhinos. Rhino is one of the top 5, the big 5. Rhino, hippo, lions, elephant, water buffalo. That's 6. Anyway, but anyway, it's some of those anyway. Maybe hippo wasn't one, but it probably should be. But anyway, that said, if you do go on a safari to Africa, I think most countries you're either allowed 2 or 3 rifles. Hence why people bring like an H&H 375 and something else, like a big bore gun or whatever. And then I guess imagine a lot of the stuff the outfitter would provide you with anyway. and you just pay for the ammo or whatever. So you'd have to look into it yourself. But for me, it's just about the guns and works of art, and they're beautiful and stuff like that. And the craftsmanship is just amazing. So, all right, so I'm gonna leave it at that. So anyway, rate, subscribe, share, comment, and like. G'day, hi, and welcome. Okay, double guns. One of my favorite, most unaffordable thing you could possibly ever want. Basically, they look like shotguns, but instead of shooting 12 gauge, 16 gauge, stuff like that, they shoot real ridiculously highly powered cartridges, such as, like, say, the 4-bore. You could also get a 2-bore, which is usually a black powder, and there's also the 8-bore and stuff like that. Now, these things are basically dangerous game, extremely large animals. I think this rifle's called the Mastodon. That pretty much says it all. Nitro Express rifles. There's so many Wildcat cartridges here, but the big staples is basically these are African, the big five, the most dangerous animals. Elephants, water buffalo, lion, and I forget what the other two is hippo, and like a giraffe, but might be anyway. But the big animals, and big animals are, it's kind of strange. Yeah, how you kill a big animal is typically not so much through shock power, but through penetration, where you've shot them in an artery and they bleed out. But the problem with some of these big animals, really big animals, is they get really angry when you shoot them, and they tend to want to sample people because they live long. Although they die and they bleed out, they tend to live long enough to usually make for the person. So back in the early 1800s, people started really kind of beefing up the rifles. At one point, the 303 British was considered an elephant gun. It was at its time, built back in the late 1800s. It was considered powerful enough that you could drop an elephant with it with a well-placed shot. Okay, and but problem is if you didn't get a well-placed shot, you ticked off the elephant. Usually had like 10 guys just pretty much turn the elephant into Swiss cheese, and even at that, the thing would still charge and stample a few people. So they had to come up with heavier rifles than that. So black powder still being around, most of the cartridges, like the 2-bore, the 4-bore, and stuff like that, a lot of them were still black powder. A lot of them still today are black powder because it's just you can't get the fine pressures. The black powder it's just no replacement for displacement. You have a big lead ball flying out at it's like basically trying to shoot a brick through something, and that's basically the effect you got. So you had penetration because you had such a big heavy bullet with lots of energy, but it also, because it was such a big heavy bullet, it also had lots of expansion and energy transfer, which would give you both worlds, that hydrostatic shock, which also known as knockdown power, hydrostatic shock to deliver as much shock energy into the animal to knock it down or knock it out, and then definitely enough to penetrate from one end of the animal to the other, or heart and lungs type of deal. So with that said, that was kind of where it was, but that still wasn't enough. They wanted to use modern gunpowders and stuff like that. So then you start seeing like this Nitro Express stuff show up, which these are all old cartridges to begin with, and I don't have the history on all of them, but in general, I don't know what came out first, but you would have really high calibered like Nitro Express, 470, the 400, the 450, which are kind